Do you remember the beloved Laura Ingalls Wilder from Little House on the Prairie? The young girl who captured our hearts with her spirit, resilience, and the charm of prairie life. Well, you might be shocked to learn what has happened to her now. The once vibrant star of our childhood has faced a heartbreaking transformation, and the reality of her life today is far from the one we remember. The truth is far sadder than you might imagine. Brace yourself for a side of Laura you never expected. Melissa Gilbert's life didn't start with the glamorous lights of Hollywood, even though she eventually became one of its brightest stars. She was born on May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles, California. But unlike many children born in this city of dreams, her first breath wasn't met by her mother's arms. Instead, she was adopted just a day later by Paul Gilbert, a comedian and actor, and his wife, Barbara Crane, a dancer and actress. From the very start, Melissa's life was shaped by people she didn't share blood with, but who promised her love through legal signatures. Her childhood home was one filled with the excitement of show business, music, rehearsals, and the never-ending hum of the television industry. It seemed like a world of endless possibilities, but behind the scenes, there was a different story. Her adoptive parents' marriage, full of bright hopes in the beginning, began to fall apart. Melissa, still young, could feel the tension. The laughter and rehearsals at home gave way to arguments and silent tears. At just 6 years old, Melissa had to witness her parents split, and with it, her sense of safety was shattered. Her mother, Barbara, was often distant and restless, chasing after her own desires in a world that demanded more than she could give. And her father, Paul, who had once been her warm and gentle protector, became less and less present. When Melissa was 11, the worst happened. Paul Gilbert, the man who had raised her, passed away suddenly. He had died from a heart failure, which everyone said was an accident. But years later, Melissa would find out that his death was not just due to illness. It was also because of the deep sadness that had taken root in his heart. This truth hit her hard. It wasn't just the loss of a father, but the loss of a man who had, in many ways, tried to be the family she never had. Melissa never truly understood the depth of his pain until much later in life, and the revelation left an indelible mark on her. The grief of losing him was intense, and it tore apart any remnants of childhood innocence. "I had to smile when I was dying inside," Melissa later admitted in her memoir. The child star who once had so much promise to fill the world with joy now faced the painful reality of losing her father, twice. The first time when he disappeared emotionally, and the second when he left her life completely. But this early pain didn't break her. It forged the strength that would later define her. Growing up in this fractured world of Hollywood fame, shifting homes, and broken relationships, Melissa learned early on that love wasn't always dependable. It could vanish without a sound, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. But Melissa also began to understand the quiet power of resilience. Even in the darkest moments, she found ways to survive, to keep going, and to hold on to the little light she had left inside. These early years were the foundation of the woman she would later become, someone who would learn to fight, not just for success, but for peace in her own soul. Melissa Gilbert's journey into fame started at an age when most kids are simply learning how to navigate the world of school and friendships. But for her, childhood wasn't spent running through playgrounds or picking out birthday presents. Instead, it was spent in front of cameras, reciting lines and adjusting to a world that constantly scrutinized her every move. At just 9 years old, she landed the role that would change her life forever, Laura Ingalls Wilder in Little House on the Prairie. The series, set in the late 1800s, captured the hearts of millions. People everywhere tuned in to watch the young girl grow up on the American frontier, a character who faced hardships with strength and resilience. For many viewers, Melissa became their little sister in the world of TV. She was no longer just a child. She was a symbol of innocence and bravery, a reflection of their own hopes and dreams. But fame, especially at that age, doesn't come without its shadows. While millions of people adored her, Melissa was struggling behind the scenes. The cameras that once seemed like a source of comfort, the bright lights that provided warmth when her world felt cold, became her prison. The set was where she spent most of her time, far away from the childhood experiences many kids her age were having. She wasn't playing with friends on weekends or riding her bike down the street. Instead, she was memorizing lines and facing the pressure of creating a perfect performance every day. It didn't take long before Melissa realized how isolated she was. By the time she turned 13, she was already more famous than most people could ever dream to be. Little House on the Prairie was a cultural phenomenon, and she was at its center. But fame has a cost, and Melissa was learning it all too well. Despite being loved by millions, she felt more alone than ever. People knew her as Laura, but few ever asked how Melissa was doing. Her life was on display, but it was also one that no one truly understood. She lived in a world where she was expected to smile and play the role of the sweet, innocent Laura, even when behind the scenes she was exhausted and overwhelmed. Fame had taken her childhood and replaced it with 12-hour days on set. And while Laura ran barefoot through golden fields on screen, Melissa's feet ached from the long hours and the weight of expectations that came with being the star of the show. Her smile for the camera was just that, something she put on even when her heart wasn't in it. Off-screen, she was a young girl surrounded by adults who told her when to laugh, when to cry, when to speak, and when to be silent. Fame meant that she didn't have the usual distractions that most kids had. She didn't get to just be a kid anymore. Instead, she was under constant observation, forced to grow up far too quickly. While her classmates were navigating friendships and school dances, Melissa was navigating her way through emotional isolation, rejection, and exhaustion. By the time she was 16, she had already been in the business for nearly a decade, and yet she felt like she didn't truly know who she was outside of her role as Laura. The constant pressure of Hollywood began to affect her mental health. She didn't have the freedom to express the confusion, sadness, or anxiety that many teenagers feel because, in the eyes of the public, she was perfect. The world saw a flawless TV star, but the truth was, Melissa was breaking inside. She was caught between the person she was told to be and the person she was starting to understand she really was. The expectations didn't just come from the public. They also came from within. Melissa knew she had to be strong for her fans, but inside, she felt like she was losing herself. And as Little House on the Prairie came to an end in 1983, Melissa found herself facing a new reality. What happens when the cameras stop rolling? For over a decade, she had been part of a beloved show that made her a household name. But when the final episode aired, it was the end of an era, not just for the show, but for the life she had built around it. The applause that once echoed in her ears was replaced by an eerie silence. Hollywood, as it often does, moved on quickly, and casting directors who once saw potential in her now hesitated to offer her roles. She had become too familiar, too associated with Laura, and as a result, she was now seen as a has-been. The industry that had once adored her now turned its back, and she struggled to find her place in a world that had once felt so welcoming. The shift from being one of America's sweethearts to feeling like a forgotten star was a painful blow. Melissa found herself wondering if she would ever have a place in Hollywood again. She was no longer the little girl with the golden curls running through fields. She was an adult trying to carve out a new identity for herself. But the world didn't seem to care about her journey beyond Little House on the Prairie. People saw the role she had played, but they didn't see the person she had become. In the years following the end of the show, Melissa fought to redefine herself. She took on roles in TV movies and tried her hand at theater. She wasn't content to be seen as just a former child star, but the industry didn't always offer her the chances she hoped for. Many of her roles, though heartfelt, didn't provide the same recognition or success as her role in Little House on the Prairie. Critics started to dismiss her, and the constant rejections took their toll on her. But Melissa refused to give up. She knew that the road to rebuilding herself wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to keep going, to prove that she was more than just Laura Ingalls Wilder. Through all the struggles of growing up in the spotlight, Melissa learned valuable lessons about strength, resilience, and survival. Fame had taught her to be strong in front of the camera, but it was in the quiet moments, away from the lights, that she truly discovered what it meant to be herself. Over time, she came to realize that her worth wasn't defined by the roles she played or the public's affection for her character. Fame had brought her recognition, but it also brought pain and isolation. It wasn't until she stepped away from the glare of the spotlight that she could finally breathe and discover her own identity beyond the character that had made her famous. Her journey is a reminder that fame, while often seen as the ultimate achievement, comes with its own unique set of struggles. For Melissa Gilbert, it was a journey of self-discovery, learning to navigate the world outside of the character she had portrayed for so many years. It was about realizing that her true worth wasn't measured by her success on screen, but by the strength she had to keep going, even when the world stopped watching. Melissa Gilbert's life, while filled with fame and success, has also been marked by heartbreaking personal losses that would shape her into the woman she is today. Behind the scenes of the iconic Little House on the Prairie star, there were moments of pain and heartache that few ever knew. She may have been America's sweetheart on screen, but off screen, she was navigating the complex and painful emotions of loss, love, and self-discovery. As a child, Melissa had already faced an overwhelming sense of abandonment, a theme that would continue to follow her through adulthood. She was adopted at the age of just 1 day, and while her adoptive parents, Paul Gilbert and Barbara Crane, gave her love and security, there was always a sense of longing. Her parents, both deeply involved in the entertainment industry, were frequently busy, and Melissa grew up in a world that felt a bit detached. She wasn't surrounded by the warmth of a family that stayed in one place. Instead, her childhood was a series of moving homes, constant change, and an unspoken feeling of being alone, even when surrounded by people. The most devastating loss came when she was just 11 years old. Melissa's adoptive father, Paul Gilbert, passed away suddenly. The official cause was a heart attack, but it was later revealed that the emotional weight of his own life, perhaps from pressures he never truly let go of, had taken its toll. His death shattered Melissa, leaving her with a deep sense of grief and confusion. To a young girl, the loss of a father can feel like the loss of a safety net, and for Melissa, that was exactly what it felt like. She was left with a broken heart, and though she continued to act, she was forced to grow up quickly to process a deep loss that would leave a scar on her heart for years to come. The pain of her father's death was complicated further when she learned the truth about his passing, that it wasn't just a simple heart attack, but a man crushed by his own sorrow. The revelation was devastating for Melissa. As if losing him wasn't painful enough, discovering the emotional depth of his suffering made her feel as though she had lost him all over again. She once said, "It broke me twice," a reflection of how this revelation affected her deeply. It wasn't just a physical loss, it was an emotional devastation that would leave her questioning the world in ways she hadn't before. The next chapter of her life was equally turbulent. As her fame from Little House on the Prairie grew, Melissa's personal life became increasingly challenging. Fame came with a level of public scrutiny that was hard to escape. People knew her as Laura Ingalls, the bright-eyed girl who ran through fields of golden grass. But behind that image, Melissa was struggling with her sense of identity. Her family life was chaotic, her heart aching from the loss of her father, and she wasn't sure who she was beyond the role of a beloved TV star. As she entered her teenage years, Melissa faced another type of heartbreak: love. At the age of 17, she met Rob Lowe, a rising star who had also become an iconic figure in Hollywood. Their romance was intense, the kind that young love often brings, full of hope, passion, and dreams of a shared future. For the first time, it seemed that Melissa had found someone who could truly see her for who she was, not just as Laura Ingalls. They were in love, and everything seemed perfect. But, as is often the case with young love, reality quickly set in. As their careers skyrocketed, the pressure and distance began to chip away at their relationship. At 19, Melissa discovered she was pregnant. While many people would have seen this as a happy moment, for Melissa, it became something much more complicated. She wasn't just facing the joy of impending motherhood, she was also grappling with the loss of the dream she had created in her mind. Rob, despite his deep affection for her, was scared. The weight of their careers, the fear of being tied down, and the pressure of their stardom made him pull away. Their relationship came to an abrupt halt, and Rob left before they had a chance to make any lasting commitment to one another. Melissa was left heartbroken and pregnant, a combination that would be nearly impossible for anyone to navigate. When the baby didn't survive, the pain of losing a child was something Melissa couldn't even begin to put into words. The loss of her pregnancy was a devastation that went beyond what anyone could see on the outside. Melissa spent days in solitude, grappling with a grief so profound that it would take years before she could fully understand it. She had lost the dream of having a family with Rob, but more than that, she had lost a part of herself in the process. It was a kind of pain that no amount of fame or fortune could heal. Though Melissa would later move on, marrying twice and finding new love, the wounds from her past stayed with her. After her brief but painful marriage to actor Bo Brinkman, where she tried to find peace in motherhood, the cracks in their relationship began to show. The chaos of fame and the weight of their personal struggles once again began to take its toll. The dream of a perfect family was slipping away, and once again she found herself facing heartbreak, this time without the possibility of healing it with the person she had believed was her forever love. It was during her second marriage to actor Bruce Boxleitner that Melissa began to experience a deep sense of both fulfillment and loss. At first, things seemed perfect. She had found stability in the form of a steady, grounded love. Together, they built a life, and she embraced motherhood with a new kind of joy. But as the years went on, cracks appeared in their relationship. Though their son Michael was the light of her life, the marriage began to fade. Melissa found herself feeling isolated and disconnected, and eventually, the marriage ended in 2011, leaving her heartbroken once again. This time, however, the loss wasn't as sharp. Instead, it was a quiet realization that sometimes love simply changes shape. There was no bitterness, no scandal, but instead a soft resignation to the fact that love, no matter how powerful, sometimes cannot survive in the way we want it to. Through all of this, Melissa struggled to find herself again. The constant cycle of love, loss, and reinvention had left her emotionally exhausted. Each new chapter seemed to bring its own heartbreak. But Melissa, always resilient, kept moving forward. She learned the hard way that the love and support she so desperately needed couldn't always come from others. She had to find it within herself. It wasn't until her later years, after all the heartbreaks and losses, that Melissa was able to truly heal. And that healing came not from finding someone else, but from finding peace with herself. Melissa's story is one of perseverance, resilience, and transformation. Her heartbreaks were not just about the men she loved or the family she lost. They were about finding the strength to move forward, even when life seemed determined to break her. Through every loss, she learned more about herself and the power of self-love. She discovered that even through the darkest moments, there is a light that can guide you through. The story of Melissa Gilbert's heartbreak is not just one of loss, but also of rebirth, as she transformed the pain into wisdom and strength that would carry her into a new phase of life. After years of heartbreak, loss, and the weight of fame, Melissa Gilbert found herself at a crossroads. She had lived through the highs of stardom and the deep lows of personal struggles. She had experienced the intense love and even more intense pain. And by the time her second marriage ended in 2011, she realized something important. It was time to rebuild, not just her life, but herself. The woman who had once been America's sweetheart on Little House on the Prairie now faced the task of finding peace within herself. After her divorce from Bruce Boxleitner, Melissa went through a period of quiet reflection. She had always been the one people turned to for strength, but now she was looking for it within herself. She spent time away from the spotlight, living a quieter, more grounded life. Gone were the days of glamorous red carpets and Hollywood parties. Instead, Melissa focused on what truly mattered: her family, her health, and her own well-being. It was a time for healing. Her two sons, Dakota and Michael, became her anchor. For years, she had poured so much of herself into her relationships and her career that she often lost sight of what really brought her peace. But now, as a mother, she saw her children growing into kind-hearted, thoughtful young men, and she realized they were the true gifts in her life. The bond she shared with them helped her through some of her darkest moments. They were the reason she kept going, even when everything around her felt uncertain. In the years following her divorce, Melissa also found solace in her marriage to actor and director Timothy Busfield. They met in 2012, and their relationship was a quiet, steady love. It wasn't the fast, fiery kind of love she had experienced in her youth. It was slow, deep, and built on mutual respect and understanding. Melissa had spent so many years chasing love, only to realize that sometimes the right kind of love comes when you stop looking for it. With Timothy, she finally found someone who truly understood her, a man who had already gone through his own set of challenges and knew how to weather life's storms. Together, they built a home, and for the first time in a long time, Melissa felt peace. They bought a small farmhouse in the Catskill Mountains of New York, a far cry from the glamour of Hollywood. This house wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was theirs. They spent their time fixing it up, planting a garden, and making it their own. There was no need for fame here, no cameras or flashing lights. Just quiet mornings with coffee, evenings spent together with no distractions, and a sense of calm that had eluded her for so many years. It was the kind of peace that she hadn't known was possible in her fast-paced, always public life. Living on the farm allowed Melissa to reconnect with herself. She found joy in simple things, tending to her garden, cooking meals, and enjoying the beauty of the world around her. The chaos of fame had faded, and in its place, she built a life centered on love, family, and simplicity. Every day brought a new sense of fulfillment, whether it was fixing something around the house or spending time with Timothy, who would become her partner in every sense of the word. They worked together, side by side, building a life based on what truly mattered. This was Melissa's new reality, one that was far removed from the spotlight, but full of something much more valuable: peace. In her 50s, Melissa began to focus on her health and well-being more than ever. The struggles she had faced with fame, relationships, and personal loss had taken a toll on her body and mind. Melissa had spent years putting the needs of others before her own, but now she realized the importance of self-care. She made changes to her lifestyle, prioritized her mental health, and took time for herself. This wasn't just about physical health, it was about reclaiming her sense of peace, something that had been missing for a long time. Melissa also found peace through her work. In 2009, she published her memoir, Prairie Tale, which resonated with many who had followed her journey. She opened up about the struggles, the heartbreaks, and the lessons she had learned. Writing became a way for her to reflect on the past, to process her emotions, and to share her story with others. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about healing and helping others who had faced similar challenges. In 2022, she released Back to the Prairie, a second memoir that further explored her transformation. This book reflected her growth, not just as an actress, but as a woman who had found a new sense of purpose. She was no longer the young girl on the prairie, but a woman who had faced life's toughest battles and emerged stronger and more grounded. Through writing, she was able to tell the world that peace is possible, even after years of struggle. By the time Melissa reached her 60s, she had come full circle. She had gone from being a child star trying to survive in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast, to a woman who had found her footing and her peace. The lights of Hollywood no longer held the same allure for her. Instead, she found joy in the quiet moments of life, in the simple acts of love and care, and in the fulfillment of living a life on her own terms. Melissa's journey wasn't about avoiding the storms, it was about learning how to weather them. She had been through heartbreak, loss, and the crushing weight of fame, but she emerged with wisdom, strength, and a sense of peace that was all her own. The woman who once chased love and validation from the world now knew that peace and fulfillment come from within. In the end, Melissa found what she had been searching for all along: peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from fame or fortune, but the kind that comes from living a life true to yourself, surrounded by those you love, and finally understanding that the greatest love story is the one you have with yourself.